Welcome to Insatiable, the podcast where we discuss the intersection of food, psychology, and culture.
We live in a culture where the Instagram phrase is cut out all the toxic people in your life. But it's also you're a little toxic. Obviously, you shouldn't keep an actual narcissist in your life, but you shouldn't label everyone a narcissist. Sometimes you have to put up with your annoying sister-in-law.
I'm your host, Ali Shapiro, an integrated health coach, 32-year and counting cancer survivor, and have radically healed my relationship with food and my body. And for the past 17 years, I've been working with clients individually, in group programs, and in company settings to do the same. Welcome. The information in this podcast should not be considered personal, individual, or medical advice. Today's episode is such a treat. We have Kate Baer, who I know some of you, she's your favorite poet. She makes poetry so accessible for those of us who don't feel good at poetry like me. I share about how I found poetry to be quite difficult in my past, but what has shifted for me? Hint, you can't think poetry. But Kate is a 3 times New York Times bestselling author. Her poetry books, What Kind of Woman, I Hope This Finds You Well, and Yet have been published on the New York Times bestselling list. And she's here today to talk about her newest book of poetry, which is called How About Now? And this poem collection, and why I wanted to have her on, is really a meditation, a missive, an emotional resonance of midlife. And her poems talk about everything, especially this collection, but all of them have, but as relates through the filter of midlife, about weight, about health challenges. We'll get into that today, about how I think the body really makes itself known at midlife for many of us, and motherhood, and all the things. And one of the things that I think really was my favorite part of the conversation, in addition to us getting to read some of the poems, you guys are going to love them. They're so soulful, but they're also super funny at the same time. I love people who can give you a range. But one of the things we get into, especially in the second half of the conversation, is about community and female friendships. And I really want you to listen to that through the lens of understanding that one of the biggest reasons that clients come to me when they're struggling with food is of the 4 tail triggers that I help clients identify, the L is loneliness, okay? And part of why I do group programs is because all of us, whether you're binging at night, emotionally eating, or not have food issues, are so lonely, okay? And that trigger, loneliness, you can have other people around you, but the, academic definition of loneliness is your social needs not being met. And so we end up talking a little bit about how, as part of your health script, you need other women in your life, you need community. And I think Kate brings up really great points about why so many of us find it hard. And there's other reasons that we find it so hard, which is why, again, in my programs, we address this and we start, in my groups, practicing bringing the belonging piece to this loneliness trigger, because belonging is not about just being around other people. It's not about everyone being the same. And we get into that in this interview, but it's about feeling significant, like you matter, like you can bring your own humanity. And so many of us kind of want to hide that these days because of cancel culture, everyone being, emotionally on edge, which again, all makes sense when we get into that. But I just want you to realize that if you have that loneliness trigger, we're going to think about that as what Kate and I talk about today. And if you, again, want to start working on that loneliness trigger, I hope you will join me in one of my upcoming group programs. I will have my Truths with Food consistency program, which used to be called Why Am I Doing This Now, but I'm going through a huge rebrand because I don't have a bunch of different offerings. Everything is under my Truth with Food methodology. They're not named that way currently, but they are all steps in my methodology. So we will be running that again in the winter of 2026. So think about that, planting some seeds now, but also think about this loneliness trigger and eating as in relation to the upcoming holidays when we can be around family, and a lot of our patterns that made us isolate and turn to food were originated with families. So just think of all that. I'm just going to set that there, let it resonate, and then enjoy today's conversation with Kate, who is just such an utter delight and going to help you know that it's important to feel good and participate in the arts, however you think of that, reading poetry or making your own art. So enjoy today's interview. Thank you so much for being here today, Kate. When I had sneak previewed on my stories that you were joining the pod, I had 10 people be like, "Oh my God, she's my favorite poet."
Oh, that's so sweet. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I know this is probably not like a typical podcast, right? That you do the intersection of food, body, and culture and stuff. But I followed your work. I think I found you in the COVID era. I don't remember. I was kind of in a postpartum / menopausal. I went through both at the same time haze, and I found your work and I loved it because I didn't used to think I could get poetry.
Yeah.
And then I realized I was trying to think the poems and you have to feel them.
Yeah.
And then a few months back, you posted a preview of the poem from your new book, How About Now, which is so brilliant. Everyone go get it. But the poem was titled Wild Yam Cream Perimenopause Does It Work Reddit. And I cackled out loud because so I went through menopause early and I went in right before the menopause information deluge that we've had. And I was like, oh my God, of course women have to search Reddit, which is the best and worst place
Best and worst. Absolutely.
to get perimenopause information. So I was like, oh my God, I hope Kate, can I find a way to convince her to come on here? And then realizing that you were a Philly girl and all that stuff. So I'm just so excited to have you here.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so happy to be here. Yes, Kylie, Kelsey, and I, silly girls on a podcast. It's great.
Yeah. So this new book, How About Now, was there an inspiration? It's about midlife. And if you don't mind, I just wanted to read the first poem because I feel like in my intellectual way of talking about things, not intellectual, but overthinking things kind of way, I think of midlife as always sort of what defines midlife is sometimes a loss in some ways. Maybe it's the loss of how you thought things would go. It's the loss of, for me, it was insomnia, loss of sleep, and which was tied to also having to redefine success and the belief that if you work just hard enough, success would all be yours. So there's a lot of loss. And I also see that with my clients. And so but then I opened up the first poem and I'm going to read it self-addressed. And I would just felt like you described it better in a poem. And you say, self-addressed. The problem is the new life costs you the old one. How long it's taken you to understand the difference between letting go and cutting through the rind. How do I look away now that I have seen you? It's the 4th day of October. Take my hand. This is the world. Is that sort of about a chasm in your and I know that the poet is not always the narrator, right? My husband has an MFA and MA background and he's like, the poet is not always the narrator. And I was like, but I think our poems are really sometimes personal. So is that sort of what you're feeling here at this midlife transition?
Yes. And what's great about poetry is that it's listed in the fiction section. It's one of my favorite things about poetry because you can really hide behind it. My work is deeply personal. I'm almost always the narrator. Not in every piece, but almost always. And so, yes, correct. This one is absolutely me and my voice and talking to myself, which is why
Mhm.
it's called Self Addressed. I hadn't heard that poem since I last looked through the book months ago. I don't look at my book again once it's in. So whenever I do these interviews, and this is one of my first ones, I was like, what's the next line going to be? That's nice. Yeah, that I liked that poem as the first piece in the entire book because I feel like it's a good intro into what a lot of it is about, which is kind of examining the old and taking from it what you want, but then moving forward into kind of the new chapter of life. And for me, I'm 40. I have neither of my grandmothers lived past 80, and so
Mhm.
actually my one of my grandmothers died at 52 and the other one died in her 70s. And so it very much feels like I'm in my midlife, even though, 40 still feels so young to me. I also feel like, I've lived a life and there's lots of things that have come up as I've gotten near 40 and am 40 health-wise. And so, yeah, I felt like that was a good starting point with this poem.
Yeah. And I love the differentiation between because so many people are like, you just have to let things go. And it's like, but no, like to your point, there's certain things that I think it's almost like midlife has been building towards. Like I have a developmental psychology background, and it's like, oh, the first half of life is like fortifying the ego, not in like an egotistical sense, but like, oh, you feel like you can have an impact on the world. You feel like you can, make your mark and more inspirational Instagram terms, but more like you have agency. And then
Yeah.
more like the second half of life through like a more soul lens is like, okay, so what are you going to do with that? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's not about letting everything go.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I love that well, not love that you mentioned health issues, but I have noticed again, in my own experience, but also with my clients, there seems to be this way that the body makes itself known in midlife in
Yeah.
some ways. And again, I believe the soul resides there. I don't think it's a coincidence. And part of, again, like I was talking about that loss for me was like insomnia. Happen to be postpartum. My entry into motherhood was, so I lost that old life of, but again, I
That's a
was
lot.
40. Yeah. I was also 41. So and it was very much like I wanted to be a mother. And I know that health issues actually delayed the release of your book. And I know you've also said for mental health reasons, we're not going to get into specifics, but I am interested if you're comfortable answering is like, how did those health issues shift what you paid attention to with your body and your relationship to it?
I've always been such a late bloomer in most areas of my life, but in this area, I was very green and very early to a midlife crisis at like 39. A whole bunch of things kind of happened at once. Some of them I don't discuss, honestly, only because back to Reddit, I've never had such anxiety before until I had medical anxiety. It landed me in the hospital twice because I thought I was having a heart attack. I had all these symptoms that some of them are still very unexplained. And it caused me to really face my own mortality. There was also other things going on that I have a pretty bad pelvic prolapse that I will need surgery for. That was kind of coming to light, which that's not life threatening, but it is also the body decaying in a way. I've had 4 children. I felt really angry about that and then really scared about all the other things that were happening. At one point, I was referred to an ALS clinic. At another point, I was getting, full body scans because my body just felt really out of control. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. It was really a mess. And I knew I couldn't put out a book at the same time as doing that. There were a lot of opportunities that I had to let go of, which was really hard. And I felt there were a lot of emotions in that. I felt scared, first of all, because I was facing my own mortality. And then I felt really sorry for myself and just really sad and really angry. And, what often happens, especially to a writer who is writing about myself, that really did end up in the book in a lot of ways, which I think is good. But it did delay the book.
And so how did like with all of this, and I mean, I actually had cancer as a teenager, so I'm very familiar with like medical anxiety and all that stuff. How did that shift maybe? Because in your poetry and in even sharing of your writing, like you have, even one of your poems, like I mean, there's so many good body poems in there. I was like, should Kate just read the book? I was like, I don't know. People have to
Yeah.
go buy it. It's really good. But you've talked about, your weight challenges and obviously people commenting on that and everything. And so was there, and I feel like in, again, the kind of the first half of life, we're kind of taught, like we're kind of disconnected from our body in a way, right? Unless it's about weight loss versus in midlife, I had the same thing. Like, and even though I almost, had cancer and almost died at midlife, it was like, oh, there is finite time in a way that for so long it was like, just will you get more time? And now it's like, oh, you're going to have finite time because you're this, a certain age and you can't live forever. But did that, all of that shift kind of the way that you related to your body in a way that like, oh, I have to be in here with all of this?
Yeah, I really had to work on, I had done so much to not necessarily be body positive, but be body neutral. I had done so much work my whole life. Most of my life, I'd lived in a fat body. And so I'd done so much work to get to a point where I felt good and I felt like already good and loved and accepted a lot of that. And so that was kind of a devastating blow to then have my body fail me and to look at, yeah, I have 4 children, they're young, and I not that I had to do my health struggles had to do with weight, but that I was looking at this body falling apart, like, I can't and thinking, "I can't do this right now. I don't have time for this. Like, can I please just put this on hold?" So, yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, you face your own mortality when you get into your 40s, but in this case, it was so amplified because whether it was true or not, I felt like it could my body could be taken from me sooner than I wanted, and so there was definitely an urgency and definitely a reckoning with my body and trying to listen to the cues and tell myself I'm okay and listen to myself. Yeah, it was very confusing. It still honestly is confusing. But yeah, there was a lot of work that I needed to do with how I talked to myself, even though I thought that and I think that's really a misconception that I had preached and still was not internalizing, which is like, you're never done the body work. Even though I felt like I had checked off that box, like, "Oh, I finally got to a place where I have accepted myself and how I look and how I feel," and then all of a sudden, I was, like, gonna be pushed off the cliff, and so, yeah, there's just been a lot of work I've had to do with being grateful for the health that I have.
Like you said, it can be confusing because on one hand, like the body is wise and it can point to symptoms, right? But on the other hand, like, nature's wild and goes off track and is full of mystery. And so it's like, what, and trying to reconcile that. And I think to you saying like being grateful for the health I have, it's almost like people always say you're lucky in relation to bad luck. It's like
Yeah.
they're like, well, the kind of cancer you had was the good kind to have.
Right,
It's like,
right, right.
I was like, yeah, and it was still 6 months of chemo and and like
Yeah, totally.
PTSD and all that stuff. So,
Right.
but I think that's something that I just find at midlife, like there's like, yeah, you have to reckon with that. And like, how are you going to actually care for your body if you haven't done that body neutrality? And I'm totally in the same camp of body neutrality because I get, I mean, body positivity started in a very different origins, right? Black women started it. It was something very different in what it's become. But so much of what it's become is still thinking about your body and kind of like
Right.
objectifying it in the same way of like, but if we're living in it and we want to feel comfortable in it, like that's something that you really have to learn how to do, especially if it's not just only going to be tied to weight loss. And the health problems often force you to do that. And it's almost like you have to learn a new language of this thing
Yeah.
that you've been with for
Right.
40 something years.
Right.
So, uh, yeah, medical anxiety is, especially this actually came up in my groups this week about how many clients are making connections through. So my framework's called Truce with Food, and it's really about teaching women to have agency with their work and that food isn't about willpower or discipline, but really about it's coupled with attachment and belonging from the time we're
Yeah.
birth. And so when we feel unsafe, but so many clients were realizing that the stories that make them turn to food, you know, there was a lack of attunement maybe in that their home, but also from medical providers who have dismissed pain or, said like, it's not that bad. And so
Sure.
it's a lot when it all comes crashing down like it did for you to be like, how do I now have to advocate for myself when, you know, doctors don't know
Yeah.
everything and sometimes there can be dismissing of women's pain and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there are so many great poems in the book about bodies, and we're taught how to experience them. And so I shared with you when I was like, I think like it was a month ago, I can't keep track of time anymore, that I was like Googling you, right? Like to see like, okay, what like even Google ChatGPT. What are some obscure things that Kate has said in interviews? So that's like,
Yeah.
I can come up with like something interesting. But when I was like, before I realized I could do this on ChatGPT, I was typing in Google Kate Baer. And then what filled in the blank was like, how did she lose weight? And I had not really, I had only seen your face from the Instagram photo. And we said that we would have this little discussion about people's fascination with women's weight, especially because I was like, Kate's a New York Times bestselling author. And I even yesterday, I was like, I'm going to Google James Clear because I know he's probably still on the New York Times bestseller list. And I was like,
Yeah.
James Clear. And I wrote weight and I typed in weight. And it was like the only thing that came up was like he wrote an article on like how to lose weight. And it was about like intermittent fasting or something. And I was like, okay, this is not the same thing. So what do you think it is
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah. When you messaged me that was the first time I had known that, but it doesn't surprise me. Although, I think the funniest part about that, and it's not funny, haha, is that my weight has been watched my whole life. I was a fat kid. And so even when I was in the pediatrician's office, that was being talked about to me. And growing up, that was constantly a discussion. And then once I reached college, I had an eating disorder and lost a bunch of weight. And that was always discussed around me, outside of me, to my face, constantly praised for how I looked then. And then when I gained weight after I had children and resumed my fat body, that was talked about again. And so I guess I'm so used to it that,
Mm,
you know, it doesn't matter if I'm fat or thin. It's always going to be talked about in my mind. I just assume that it's being talked about, but it's not really my business anymore. I've really let that
mm,
go. Like I said, before all these health struggles, I really came to a place of peace. And I'm trying to get back there, although this time it's not so much about weight, but it's about, like I said, the anxiety that I have about my own mortality and the things that are happening with me. But as far as other people's input and questions and commentary on my body, that's no longer my business. It's honestly very boring to me. It's boring to me when other people talk to me about other people's bodies. It's one of the most least interesting things about a person is their weight. And so I don't really have anything else to say about that except fine. I mean, you must be really bored if that's what you're Googling.
I know, I know. It is. I love that you said it is like the least interesting thing about someone. I think though in our culture, like, and I think it's so important to try to sift through this and leave most of it behind in this midlife transition is like we think it says something about women, right? Like it's the subtext that's there, right? And it's like you don't know, right? Like I mean, but we make these assumptions that they're successful or they have it all or all this stuff. And so I think people, I don't think they're, I don't even know if they know that what they're really curious about is like the inner dimensions of what's happening with someone, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I never understood that, like who wore it best. Was that in like People, although I don't get out much, read a lot of mainstream stuff, but do you remember, was that like People magazine or maybe they still do it, but like who wore it best? And it was like,
Yeah, actually, Katie Storino, I don't know if you follow her, but anyone who's listening does a revamp of Who Wore It Best. She's like a plus size writer and model, and I don't want to call her an influencer, but I guess in 2025 that is what she is. And she does a Who Wore It Best on Instagram, but it's not about who wore it best. It's just like Sarah Jessica Parker will wear an outfit, and then she'll wear it, and she'll put it side by side, and she's like, both of us are wearing it really well. And so there are so many spaces where these outdated ways of thinking are being revamped. And I try to keep my, online world and my physical world full of people like that.
Yeah, I loved how you said in an interview, because this is actually the deeper work I do with clients, is that you said you co signed on her sentiment that no matter your weight, the real work of body image is internal. A specific number on a scale is not and will never be the answer to self love and wholeness. And I was like,
Yeah.
yes, that's the key. Yep.
Yeah. She gets asked about Ozempic a lot. And I've really watched how she's talked about it because she could really go off, I think, in a way that could be really harmful to others, but instead she really gets to the truth of it, which is that it doesn't matter. The losing weight is never going to fix your wholeness. And she does really important work for women, and I encourage everyone to follow her.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love, because this is, so brave. And again, I think part of this midlife and what you're talking about, even with like grappling with your own mortality, is like really, right? It's one thing to intellectually know you don't have forever. And then it's another thing to, I don't know, we need a better word for like get it or like embody it or like, like really accept it. Do you know what I mean? But there
Yeah,
is a difference between like, okay, I understand this in theory and it's hitting me with like really how to grapple with this. But I was hoping, and I was wondering if you would read it but reading Home of the Brave, because I think so much of the work that I do with clients is really helping them see, it's on page 82, is seeing that like a lot of what they think and what they've been told to put their attention towards or how to think about it is socialized conditioning, right? It's like, you know, from all, it's from culture. Even if your family, you grew up in a healthy, like weight positive, weight neutral, weight whatever family, the culture comes in above you and makes you think that your thoughts, like these are actually your thoughts versus maybe you have to start to individuate in a new way from them. And I thought the poem Home of the Brave was just like articulated this so much more beautifully than my developmental theory. So would you read read it?
sure, sure. This is called Home of the Brave. As I shrunk and expanded into various bodies, I realized that in order to worship thinness, you must first be born to the right country. The rest comes easy. A second language, a mother tongue. All you must do is look around you. Instruction booklets left in every room. I actually wrote that poem because of exactly what you were talking about. My kids are born into a very body neutral house. We never comment on other people's bodies. We don't comment on each other's or our own or put down our own bodies. And yet they all have such internalized fat phobia just from living in the world. And it comes out all the time. And I guess I was under the false assumption that as long as I kept myself right, they would be okay. But I can't protect them from the outside world in so many areas. And one of those areas is just the crazy obsession we have with weight in this country and the fat phobia, which has never really ramped down, in my opinion. There are a lot more body neutral spaces. Like I said, I really try to keep my worlds that way. I don't participate in conversations about weight. I'm very careful with myself and with my family, and yet you can't keep that out of your kids' lives, and that's where that came from.
Well, and I love that you said like Home of the Brave, right? That's our part of our national anthem. And it's like the right country. And I actually I don't know if you know Anne Helen Peterson. She writes culture study.
Yeah, she's
But I
great.
had her on the podcast and we did a whole episode on how like Protestantism and Puritanism, I always have trouble saying it. There's so many P's there.
Yeah,
But how that purity culture, right, is what wellness is, like even quote unquote clean eating and all that stuff. But this kind of ties back to like what we think weight means, right? And the Puritans and Protestantism, right, made us think that like, oh, it shows that you're hardworking and disciplined and you're
yeah.
chosen by God, right? So it's like
Hmm.
it goes so deep. And
Oh, so deep. Yes.
yeah. Even if you don't think you're religious, which I consider myself, more spiritual, but it's like, no, but you still grew up with a country that has these values. And so it's going to be wrapped up into the culture. But I just think also it's so important you said as a parent, because so many of my clients, they come to me and they're like, I don't want to pass this on to my kids. And that's great. And that puts a really heavy burden on the mom or the dad, versus,
Yeah.
and again, having that modeled at home helps, right? It is a
Yeah.
counterweight for
Yes.
sure. And so much of it is culture. So it doesn't mean we're doomed. It just, someone was
No,
like,
it
does this
doesn't
mean
mean
we're
we're
just
doomed.
doomed? And I'm like, no, no.
No, it doesn't mean we're doomed, but I think it's very helpful to be aware that our kids take in so much outside of us more than we know.
I know. I know. My son just started kindergarten and like he'll come home with these phrases or this stuff. And I'm like, where'd you get that? And then he's
From
like,
school.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh.
oh.
You know who's teaching him that stuff is my youngest because I have a high schooler and a first grader. And so, he's learning everything from his big brother and teaching it to his entire first grade class. So I apologize on behalf of all of the uh, mothers of youngest children who are going and preaching the gospel of 6, 7, and all sorts of weird stuff to all the other kids in the class who haven't heard it. I'm so sorry. I do my best.
Well, and I was actually biking with a friend of mine in the neighborhood. She has two girls, and I was telling her about your poem in the pasture. And I'm just going to read the one line. It's like, one by one, my children find their private worlds. And I was telling her, I was like, when I read that, I just started crying because it's like, it's great. And it's like, oh, I guess I'm raising you to leave. Like, you're not leave, but like be your own person if I'm doing this remotely
Right.
well, you know?
Right.
And she's like, what do you think she meant by that? I'm like, well, I think that's what poetry is about. Like,
I hope that it's a mirror. I hope that it's a mirror and any of my pieces or my books can reflect back to you what you need to see or
yeah,
hear.
right. It hit me this year. Kindergarten was a big transition for me. I think my son's name Essay. He transitioned fine, right? And I was just like, oh my God,
Oh, it's often so much harder for them. So much harder.
I
Oh my goodness.
know. I
Yes. Oh
know.
my when my firstborn went to kindergarten, I was a wreck. I was like, he's leaving me and he'll never return to me. And it's not true.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be all right. But I was a mess too.
I know. I think about like the connection that actually just this morning, my son was somehow it came up like cells in your body. I forget. And he's like, oh, I know. Our dog is aging and he was at the vet yesterday and he was just like scared. And I was like, oh, my heart is just with coffee. And he's like, well, is your heart with me? And I was like, yes. And I was like, yes. I was like, actually, your cells are still in my body. Like we are still connected that way. And he's like, you took my cells? How many cells do I have? And I was like, no. I was like, you have like
Oh my God, that's so cute.
I know. I was like, you have like trillions, I think, of cells. I just mean like, because you grew in my belly, like there's still circulating cells and it's just a metaphor for like we're still connected, like just not as,
Yeah.
so we were like trying, I mean, you try not to die laughing because they're so earnest, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you took my cells. Okay, so there is a quote going around and it's attributed to Martha Beck and Naomi Watts. This is like the internet. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, right? Mark Twain was like, you'll die of a misprint. It's like,
Yeah. Yes.
but I heard it somewhere else first. I had read it somewhere else. I think in like the New York Magazine interview with this actress, but I can't remember who. But the general idea is, and I know you're not like fully in menopause, but I think it applies to midlife. Menopause is when all the girls you were come out to play.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't it good?
It's so good.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, and again, I know you're still kind of working through some of this medical anxiety, and that is like my heart goes out to you. But I was thinking about this quote through the lens of body, and I'm finding here in midlife, I feel like I was really athletic as a kid, but I went to like a big high school where if you weren't like immediately good at something, you essentially like got cut from the team, right? Like it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
one of those places, and it was like, oh, I was really competitive and athletic, and I mean, I did like rec leagues, but it's like, oh, I diverted all that energy into weight loss, which like I mean, we all have regrets, but it's like now here at midlife, I'm just like competitive with like things at the gym that are, and they're not tied to weight loss. They're just like, oh, I'm a competitive person and I can own that. Or like, I can do box jumps, right? Or I've found that like, I just like love biking. Like I live near a forest and I go out with my girlfriends. It's so fun. And it's just about like, I can feel my body move. I'm grateful I can do this. Like I run into deer. I mean, I don't run into them, but like,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I'm in the forest. Like, have you found anything that you feel like, and again, I know your midlife crisis was only like a hot minute ago. But are you finding like new ways that you get to be those previous girls, even maybe with your writing and what's meaningful to you?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really fun about getting into your 40s is also watching all of the women around me be in their 40s and take pottery classes and try stand up and decide I'm going to write a book or I'm going to start this hobby or I'm going to take time for myself or oh, I've always loved this. How about now? Which has really been so inspiring to me. I dedicated this book to my parents because I felt like they embodied this message of we only have this one life, so let's do it. And I find that for myself, I've been doing things that I've never done before because I might as well try. And a lot of it is playful. Most of it is playful. And it's those playful selves of my youth as a teenager or as a kid. I was a very silly child. I was a very imaginative child. I was not athletic, but I was on in the school musicals, and so now I'm going to Broadway raves. I take trips to New York as much as I can. I'm hosting, themed parties at my house because that's who I've always been, so I might as well do it now. I have the space to do it, and by that I mean like space my kids aren't being potty trained anymore. The emotional space to do that. Yeah, I absolutely feel that way, and it's like I said, I think one of the best parts is also watching everybody else around me do that, and sometimes it's not necessarily joyful, and I mean that in a way of, like, I also watch in myself too, women struggle to get there because they're like, "Something's not right. I'm 40, something's not right." And I think that that's part of that midlife crisis. Like, wait a second, I'm not happy. And then the realization, it's different for everyone of like, oh, it's because I'm not being playful. I'm not letting all those women come out and be together. And so yes, oh, I love that quote. It's so true.
Yeah. Well, and I think this comes back to kind of like your beginning poem of like, and what we were talking about, like, it's not about letting everything go. It's like, what am I bringing back in that maybe was always me? But, if I'm going to like throw big terms around, like a patriarchal culture encouraged me to separate from, right? Like play isn't productive. I mean, it
Yeah.
is, but
Yeah.
it's not like, not for the capitalistic machine,
Right.
right?
Right. 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 Right.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about because I now read your book. Like I've read it so many times, I cannot recommend it enough. But and a lot of people listening, and the clients that I'm working with, it's like I feel guilty even trying to feel good when the world is the way it is. And I was like, I get that, but that's rooted in this like zero sum, mentality that America was founded on, right? Or, if men get ahead, if women get ahead, it's costing men. If white people get ahead, it's costing, I mean, if minorities get ahead, it's costing white people, right? Like all of this stuff. And really it's not either or. And how we need that playfulness. We need poetry. We
Yeah.
need art right now to
Absolutely.
remind us how to feel and be human, especially with what's going on politically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's been the case since the beginning of time. I think it's very funny to be asked in interviews all the time, do you think poetry is dying and art is dying? And I mean, you really have to zoom out and look at humanity from the very beginning. There's always been art, there's always been poetry since the beginning of language, and there's been terrible things have happened. Plagues and wars and civilizations destroyed, but art is always there and it always will be there until I guess we're wiped off the planet. It's not going anywhere, even if it's sometimes hard to find.
When it feels like I was saying in one of my groups, it feels kind of like art and like finding what's meaningful is what keeps us going. It sustains us to like say, like, are we still going to continue this human part of the experiment? Do you know what I mean?
Right, right, exactly.
Well, and speaking of playful, like the front cover, and I was cracking up because you were like, "Oh my God, Taylor Swift, like, got you and Taylor have like similar like
What's
covers."
up, girl? Yeah, she's with me here.
Yeah. And so I read that this is you on the cover, which is
Yeah,
different than
that's
other covers.
totally me.
Was that part of like bringing some of that playfulness in?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't write this book thinking I would be naked on the cover, but I once it was time for the cover process, I had a hard time thinking of what to put on there, and it just kinda happened. This summer, a photographer from Canada, her name's Claire, she reached out to me and said, how do you feel about me coming to your house, staying with you, and me taking a bunch of artistic photos of you?" And I'm like, "Sure, girl." She's like, "What?" Because again, I'm like, "How about now?" I don't know, sure, I don't care. I never met this woman. And at a certain point, I took all my clothes off and did this shoot in this pond, which was a really beautiful it was such a fun day, and it was a really beautiful day, and we took this photo, and then, that was it. But I had all these photos on the computer, so I sent a bunch to my publisher. Not all of them were naked, and they chose this one, and I was like, "Actually, that's perfect." So, yeah, I the only thing is I hope that when people see it, it doesn't look like I'm drowning, but instead coming out of the water, but I guess it's open to interpretation.
I get the feeling of just like that subliminal space that is
Yeah.
that transition. And I think your writing is so good about that. It's like, and again, we know intellectually, like in order to experience joy, we have to be with grief. We know that everything's about like this tension of opposites, right? And you communicate that. And I feel like I go through all these emotions when I'm reading the poems. I mean, some of them are just like, again, cackling out loud, and then others are like, oh my God, my
Oh,
son's developing his own life, like it's just,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's that's feeling human.
yeah,
But I love that you share that because I feel like this is what kind of what my question was trying to get to is like, I feel like you're having fun with your body, right? Even like you've let go of
yeah.
other
Oh,
people.
totally.
Like,
Yeah,
let's just be playful here, right?
yeah, yes, absolutely. And her coming out here came at a great time because I had kind of resolved a few, or at least come to some peace with some things that were happening to me. And so, yeah, she kind of caught me at a great time. So, yeah, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. So you had talked about seeing the other women in your lives like do pottery and write and you yourself kind of right like getting naked for your book cover. And one of the things that my work really centers around is belonging, not just connection, but like the significance of feeling like you
Yeah.
can disclose part of yourself, to other people. Because if we don't feel like that, that's why a lot of people eat because food stimulates attachment chemicals. But I think we know intellectually that, not intellectually, but if you've read studies, loneliness is like a bigger predictor of health, right? Than like smoking now. Or like loneliness is the new smoking. I forget, or the previous Surgeon General like was targeting loneliness, right? But it's not something that we can like measure or track. But I think having other women in your life, and I know part of why I run groups is because it's just the healing of being with other women, right?
Yeah,
But
totally.
can you speak to like how you view having those other women contribute to your health and your sanity, mental well-being? Because there's poems about them, so it made me want to ask you about that.
I talk about my women in every book because they're such a huge part of my life, a huge part of my mental health. It's the only way that I could be married. It's the only way that I could mother. And that's always been very important to me. I mean, it's one of the greatest predictors of health. And we are in such a lonely world now because we live so much of it online. And while it's fun to share memes to the group chat and it's fun to meet people over Zoom, there is nothing like face to face. There is nothing like knowing what your friends had for breakfast and knowing that after they went to the post office, they ran into this random guy that they saw later and how funny that was. There's something about the intimacies of life and sharing that with other people that brings such a wholeness. And men miss out on this all the time, which is why I always say I'm so glad I'm a woman because there's a reason we live longer, and it's because we have each other. And if you look back in history or just even go to any other culture, you will find groups of women gathered together on street corners and coffee shops on their front porches because that's how we stay alive. That's how we especially as a marginalized group in a lot of places, including our own country, it's such a way to stay sane and have life through those connections. And so it's always been extremely important to me to keep those connections strong.
Yeah. And how do you do that? Like, because I think it's like,
Well,
I
it's
mean,
very hard. And actually, that is also something I try to talk about in most interviews, most book tours, because this is asked of me a lot. So thank you for reminding me. It is not easy. And I think that is the greatest misconception that people have is that
Mhm.
having friendships is easy. And I hear people say this line all the time. It shouldn't be this hard. Honey, yes, it should be. Because having relationships is very hard. It's hard to human. It's hard to human with somebody else. You know, it doesn't matter how close you are with someone, you're going to have conflict. In fact, you'll have more conflict the closer that you are. You have to work through that. It's like a marriage. Do you think, I mean, is anyone walking around saying marriage is easy? No, but you work through it. You take steps, you care for each other. The big viral phrase is the cost of community is inconvenience. And then that's so true. You have to be inconvenienced. You have to withstand annoyance. We live in a culture where like the Instagram phrase is like cut out all the toxic people in your life. But it's like also you're a little toxic. Like
Yeah.
you're a little toxic. Obviously, you shouldn't keep an actual narcissist in your life, but you shouldn't label everyone a narcissist. Sometimes you have to put up with your annoying sister-in-law. Sometimes your friend brings another friend who is kind of annoying and always talks about themselves and youth soccer. And you just have to listen about youth soccer a little extra time and then move on. Not everything needs to be this like crisis where you cut everyone out of your life. It's hard to have friends. It's hard to have community. And those two things are different.
Mm.
It is hard. You have to work on it. But like aren't isn't everything that has value in our life you have to work on it? I I I find that to be a very frustrating line of thinking that it should be easy because really it's not easy.
Wow, you just said so many good things I like need to circle back at.
Well, I'm sorry. I get on
No,
my
I love
soapbox
it.
about that and then I think of every thought I've ever had about this and it's something I feel very passionate about because we are in a lonely place in 2025 and I would love to see us move in a better direction.
Yeah. Well, you said, having my girlfriends is the reason I'm still married. And my friend Sarah Peck, I think she attributed it to Kurt Vonnegut, but he said, like when couples are fighting, they're really just saying I'm lonely. And it's like you can't expect this one person to be everything for
Oh
you.
my gosh, if I expected my husband to fulfill all my emotional and communicative needs, I mean that's so unfair to him. It's so
Yeah.
unfair to me. That's going to bring up that 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 that's a recipe for disaster. He doesn't want I don't know if it's because of he's a man or because of his personality, but he doesn't want to rehash the same social situation from 6 years ago like my friend Mo does. If I called her right now and been like, "I actually thought of something else about that time 6 years ago," she'd be like, "Let's talk about it." There's women fill in women the relationship with friends, whether you're a man or a woman, is so important because you can't put all your apples in one basket because they will absolutely let you down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just love that you bring it's not fair, right? That expectation.
Oh,
It's
it's
it's just
absolutely not fair. Yeah.
yeah. And then you said it's inconvenient. And one of the things that has been a huge shift for me in midlife is like, I used to like, and I still value efficiency, but I realize so much of my irritation in general is because I'm expecting, and it's like even with my son, it's like when I would be frustrated, I'm like, oh, I'm expecting this to be efficient. Like kids are not
Yeah.
efficient,
Oh
but
my gosh, no.
relationships are so inefficient. And
So
again, that's
inefficient.
part of like, is this my value? Or is this like, if I'm always trying to make relationships efficient or like, everything time with my son efficient, like I'm missing out on like the juice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that you said it is inconvenient. It's all that stuff.
Well,
And
it's yeah, it's like it's also this idea that like I can't have a potluck at my house because my house isn't nice enough or my house I don't have anything to do or it's going to be too stressful, but it's like that might be true And it might be, and talk about something inefficient as a potluck with a bunch of people who are late and two people brought baked corn. Fine. That's so annoying, sure. But skipping out on those kind of community activities or in real life activities is taking away why we're here. If we're only communicating digitally and talking through our phones, which is great. I talk to my friends all day long on my phone. I'm so happy to have it. I'm so happy to have apps like Voxer and Marco Polo and iMessage to like again tell them I just saw this weird guy at the post office again. But if we skip out on the inconvenient parts like a potluck at someone's house, gosh, we're missing out on the good stuff. And it is annoying. And you do have to clean up after. And I do have to get my kids to bring up the chairs from the basement and set up the table and someone spilled juice all over the carpet. But I would much rather be cleaning up after that than sitting here after a whole weekend of just my own family at home in a clean house. I mean, we're going to get to the end of our life. Are you glad you had your house clean the whole time? Or are you glad that you gathered together and played cards? I really, it's something that I really am trying to pass along to my kids that it is inconvenient and we do have to carry the chairs around, but look at all the fun we had.
I love that. And it's because my work is about getting out of all or nothing, either or, and holding the and. So it's like, yeah, it's all this and it was so fun that we're going to do it again. And it'll be
So
less
fun.
annoying the next time because we'll
Yeah.
remember why we're doing
Yes.
it. You said there's a difference between community and friends. Can you talk more about that?
I think there's this idea that our communities have to be perfect. It's a big reason why people leave the church. Now, I also don't go to church anymore. I grew up in the church. I don't do that, but I kind of having zoomed out of that a little bit, I've realized that about church. But yeah, I think there's this idea that our communities everyone needs to be just like us and think like us and do everything the same way, and then that can be our community. Well, you're not going to find that many people who are going to vibe with you in the same way. That's your close friend group. And even in there, there's going to be a lot of disparity. Both things are important. Close friends that you can rely on, that are going to come bring you a meal when you're sick, that are going to pick up your kids from soccer, those people that you can trust innately with everything in your life and rehash the same things. That's important to me. But the broader community of the people on the soccer sidelines or the people at our schools or whatever community we're involved in, it's hard for me too. But we to have those conversations and to show up for each other in a community way is also really important.
Well, and I love that you bring that up because belonging, I think sometimes people think it's about everyone having the same values and all that stuff. And it's like, no, it's that you're allowed to show up as you are and the differences are accepted. And it's nice in theory, but it's hard in practice,
It's
especially.
really hard when you live in Trump country. It's very, very hard for me to not walk around and think I'm better than everybody else or more enlightened than everybody else. Instead of having real conversations with people, that's very hard for me. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying I think it's important for humanity. That's what I'm saying. I don't succeed at it all the time. I fail all the time. I fail with my friends. I fail with my husband and my kids and my community. I'm not like the spokesperson for having perfect relationships with all of these groups of people. It's more like it's really worth trying because it's really easy to sit inside and scroll Instagram reels. That's what I am trying to say really under all of this is it's much easier to sit at home on our phones than try to be out in the world in real life because it is hard and it's messy and it's bumpy and it's clunky, but I do think it's worth it at the end of the day.
Well, and you were talking about like, things are hard. And I think about how just relationally, like this instant gratification culture of just like scrolling, like ordering on Amazon, like it just everything can be instant for you. Like even my son, like he's really into sports. He watches old Eagles games and it's like, oh, it's time for
Go
dinner. He
birds.
watches, yeah, go birds. Although there's a little something shaky going on the last two games, but
It's tough. It's tough.
it's tough. I know being a Philadelphia fan is tough.
It's really tough right now. Yeah, Red October, it was a really disappointing fall for us, but
Yeah. But like he'll be like, and he won't finish a game and he's like, fast forward. I want to know the ending. And I'm like, okay, bud, like, first of all, there used to be like, games were only on Sundays. Like we could never afford a VCR growing up. Like nothing was taped. Like, so I'm
yes.
just, I'm just saying, like, it's just everywhere you turn, there's this, it changes our expectations of like, oh, if I meet, and then Instagram, oh my God, the pop psychology on Instagram is making it's like, I'm always like, well, the answer is depends. That's why I'm not on there a lot. Cause I'm like, no one wants nuance on there, but it's,
No, no one
it's,
wants
yeah,
nuance on the internet. The internet has been scrubbed of nuance.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone is like, takes this and it's like you said, it's like, I mean, I was just wondering all these people who think like every person that disagrees with them or is different, that's like healthy boundaries. And now it's like, yeah, you're left like by yourself,
You are
So
left by yourself or in an echo chamber where you're just having people repeat back to you what you want to hear. And I don't think that's ultimately beneficial to anyone.
it's not because, I've been thinking because the first time Trump got elected, I only realized it like 6 years later when I was talking to my friend who's a therapist that it was a relational trauma response for me. Like it wasn't like I was diagnosed with cancer again, but I just didn't see it coming. So it was like,
Yeah.
and I was just like all this stuff. And so this time I'm handling it a lot better. And I know people who have voted for him and I know them to be very good people, right? Like quote unquote good people. Like,
Yeah.
like they don't
Totally.
like him, but they like their and we don't need to debate this, but
Oh
I'm
no.
just like,
Let's not.
what? Yeah, yeah, let's not.
Let's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, especially with this immigration stuff, they're like, this has been taken way too far. Like they don't agree with the more whatever.
Sure.
But it's like, I've had to sit there and be like, I don't freaking know the solution. Like I had this aha like a couple years ago of like, oh, even though I think I've worked through my perfectionism, I was assuming that there is this perfect way to civilize, be a civilization, right? Like there's these certain values and everything. And it's like, no, when you even think of like historically what the left and right have been, the different values of like collectivism versus individual responsibility, right? Like, and again, these are broad generalizations because I think we all have both. But it's like, oh, sometimes you have to value small government versus big, like, and I was just like, oh my God, like, there's no perfect solution. There is just certain values and trade offs of those values, right? And so I was like, it was just very humbling for me to be like, I don't know. I know this is not it, but it's a lot easier to say,
It's
I
a
don't
lot
want that.
easier to say you're wrong.
Yes.
Obama has this famous little talk, I'm sure you've seen it, where he talks about how frustrating it is or how he has no interest in people who come up to him and say, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, you're wrong, you're doing it wrong. Then give me a solution.
Yes.
I want people with ideas and solutions. And it's really easy on the internet to talk about all the ways someone is doing something wrong. The left loves to do this.
Yes.
I love to do this too. It's very easy to sit up on a up chair up here and look down at all these people making bad decisions. But
Yes.
where's the answer? Where's the idea? Not that we need to have a solution, but an idea. And yeah,
Yeah.
I I totally am right there with you.
Yeah, I was talking to my sister about this because in developmental psychology, I was telling my sister it's not even a spectrum; it's a circle. But people on the far left and far right, it's purity culture. It's just dressed up differently, right? On
Yeah.
the right, it's evangelical. On the right,
They
it's
should
like
just
you
kiss
can never
already.
be.
You're the same. Just kiss on the lips. The far
Yeah,
right and the far left. You guys are just marry each other because
yeah,
you are just it's just a different costume, but with the same ideology of being you're right and everybody else is wrong.
yes, yes. And it's a different way to be pure, but it's the same binary that we need
Yeah.
to shift. So, okay, so one last question because I think this sort of speaks to what I've experienced. Again, I'm 47. I'm through menopause. I'm a little further along age wise and hormonally than you.
Oh my God. Should I get the yam cream? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, no, I haven't. But I think, and again, our culture. If we were in a healthier culture, we'd have more support for this. But I do think that perimenopause and menopause, like women have built in transitions where they can, especially I think with postpartum and menopause, where it's often a trip to the underworld, right? And sometimes it's coming out as health symptoms, but the underworld, at least what I've experienced, again, I had to reclaim the part of me that could rest and play and not take myself so seriously, and everything had to be productive and exceptional. But I wanted to end on because you said the last line in this poem is your favorite line in the book. And I feel like I love this poem. This to me is such your range. So the title is You Used to Text Me for Nudes, but now it's just for information for our taxes. Would you read the poem? Because you
Yeah,
read them much
sure.
better than me.
This is called You Used to Text Me for Nudes, but now it's just for information for our taxes. What happens, happens. A story will always beg for a plot. It's true God gives women the opportunity to be more beautiful. Here I am, all these years later, fuller and more desirable than I ever was. What will you do with this information? Lift your mouth to the horn and call me back to you.
Mm. And your favorite line is,
It's the last. Lift your mouth to the horn and call me back to you. There are some times when I write poetry, and it's very, very rare, where I write a line like that and the angels sing, and I'm like, "Oh, it's like four-part harmony." I write so much by ear. And so when all the notes in a chord come into place, that's why it's my favorite. It's not even necessarily what it's trying to say, but how I felt when I wrote it. That's why it's my favorite. But I do like that poem. I look forward to my husband reading it. He doesn't read the book till it comes out, so I hope he likes that one.
well, I love that you said it's how I felt when I wrote it, because to me, that's like the feminine face of God, right? It comes through our body. It's the pleasure, it's the feeling, it's the felt sense. And I think that's something that I don't know, the second half of life, like talking about the fuller, right? Like I think of like we used to think like, oh, you're so full of yourself. But like in second half of life, that is so great.
I
You're
know.
so full of yourself.
Yes, and it's not a vanity. It's I'm full of who I am.
Yes.
I even mean it physically too. Women, especially if you've had children, you can be a little bit more curvy. So I mean it in that sense. I also mean fuller, and we're gaining we've gained all this life and we're carrying it with us. And it feels so good. It feels really good.
That's how I feel. And I know I'm like, I just feel like, oh, I don't know, full. I love that you said it's not about vanity. It's about, I'm like discovering who I am. I'm bringing all the other girls back, versions of
Yeah,
other.
it's why the sex is better. It's why when you're taking a walk and you're looking out at the earth, you kind of feel like God yourself because it's like you're carrying all this life with you. And
Yeah.
it's just a beautiful place to be. Menopause has gotten such a bad rap, perimenopause too. There are some really shitty things about it, but there's
Yeah.
also so much good. There's so many beautiful things, so many things women have gotten to shed, like the constant need to get men's attention.
I
That's my
know.
favorite thing to let go of, man. And I've heard that especially from older women. That's their favorite part of kind of being erased from the male gaze. It's like, well, thank God. I, d-
Yeah.
I didn't want to be there anyway.
I was at the gym this morning and they were playing like old 80s, 90s. I couldn't even remember what it was by the time I got back because Carlos, my husband, was like, what song were you jamming out? Because the instructor was like, are you singing, Allie? Because I had gone to the 5 a.m. class because I'd been up since 3:30. She's like, I like 5 a.m. Allie, but it was all this like songs that I used to sing and be like,
Yeah.
will a boy just like me? And now I'm just
Yeah.
like, no, I just like the beat. I don't
Yeah.
like, it was reminiscing about how little I care anymore. When I
Yeah.
was in like, in middle school or high school, it was like, oh, like,
Yeah.
yes, it's because all those songs, oh my God, they're all codependent. They're all about like, my
Oh
life
my God,
begins
they're
when the boy
terrible,
finds,
the
yeah,
lyrics. I know, but you can repurpose them and sing them for yourself, and that's really fun.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for being here. This has been such a
Good.
joy. The book comes out November 4th and it is available. It's called How About Now? Get it. I read it before bed. I read it when I actually need to. One of the big things that I work on with clients is the tired trigger, and it's about different kinds of rest. And this book is just such a like a replenishment of soul. So
Oh, thank you. That's such a
yeah,
compliment.
yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to add or say that I didn't get to?
No, no. Thank you so much. This conversation has been so fun. I could talk for like 3 more hours about all of these topics.
I know. I know. All right, everyone, go get How About Now? Let's get Kate back on the New York Times bestseller list.
Thanks, Allie.
Yeah, thank you.